Right. So once again, good evening to everyone, and let's get started with this session. So this session is primarily meant for non-engineers, and let me speak about this. That why am I saying that this session is meant for non-engineers? Because if you are an engineering student, then what you should be looking at is trying to get a great depth and hold on quantitative ability as a section, because that happens to be your strong zone. You have been in the field of engineering and you have been doing a lot of calculations, you have been dealing with equations throughout your life for 4 years of being an engineer. That means you should target quantitative ability as a section which is really good for you, and you should be looking at 99.5 plus, and all of those kind of numbers is what you should look at, especially when you have about 5.5 months in hand, right? So this session is not for you. If at all you are listening to me, you are an engineer, you have been preparing for some time, then I am not going to talk about anything that's going to help you, right? This particular session is primarily meant for non-engineers. And why am I saying it for non-engineers? Because there's a lot of rumor in the students community that it is very difficult for non-engineers to clear the CAT paper. And the primary reason that they say that, why it is very difficult for the non-engineers to clear this paper is that this paper has got a math section which is called as quantitative ability section, which they're not really good at, right? So that's the premise that we are going to start with, that the student community talks like this, but with the help of data and facts, I will try to prove you that it's a very, very doable paper, provided you know what you have to do on the paper and what you don't have to do on the paper. Both are equally important parts of strategizing for this particular paper. And in the course of today's session, we are going to look at that, right? So without any further delay, let's get into the session. This is a brief about my profile. I have done my MBA from Narsee Monjee, Mumbai for the year 2014-16. I've worked with AjayZener for about a couple of years. Post that, I've co-founded GradSquare, and I've been, before my MBA also, I was into training, and hence I have a 10 plus years of experience in mentoring students for CAT, GRE, GMAT, and various other aptitude exams as well. Okay, so let's move on and look at the agenda of the session. The agenda of the session is as follows. We are going to first of all try and answer the question that if MBA is a field which is generic and you are saying that everybody can do the can do MBA, then why is there a section which is biased towards engineer, which is saying that technical students will be able to do this paper better? Why is there a necessity of putting a section like quantitative ability in the paper? So we will try to answer that question. So that's the thing. Okay, I have one student asking me something. Sir, I did BTech from biotechnology branch. Does this session makes me eligible for the session? Yes, Vedant, it is not about eligibility. It is about looking at you yourself and trying to think about it. That is quantitative ability happens to be my section which I'm targeting 99.5 plus, or is it a section which I'm not really great at, but I want to understand how can I still do well on this particular session. So you decide whether you should be sitting in this session or not. The intent is to ensure that without preparing rigorously on every topic, can we still clear this paper with a respectable percentile on quantitative ability section. Okay, so you decide whether the quantitative ability section is a stronghold or it's a weak point and you want that kind of an input or not. Okay, so relevance of the QA paper is what we are going to talk about. We are going to look at historical data. So what I've done is I've picked up a last 2 years of CAT paper and tried to do a bit of analysis in terms of understanding on two aspects. One, what that paper contains in terms of what kind of questions are there. Second, the result of those papers in terms of understanding at what kind of a scale score I end up with what kind of a percentile. So that gives you a very clear picture of what to expect from the paper. We are going to look at important topics based on our analysis of historical data and understand what are the topics that you must do and what are the topics that you can afford to skip and get into this paper depending upon what we have seen in the last 2 years of paper. How to prepare for QA section in about 5 months of time is what I'm going to deal with, giving you clear-cut idea as to, as a non-engineer, what you should be preparing on. Okay, challenges faced and how to overcome those, specifically from a perspective of non-engineers. Time management on the mock papers when you are going to write those mock papers, and at the end we will leave the floor open for any of the questions if you have, and I'll be happy to pick up any of the questions. Please feel free during the session to drop me a message on the Zoom chat window. If you have any doubts or any clarifications that you want me to talk about, I will take those doubts as and when I find time to look at that. And if I feel that there is a relevant section coming up, then I might skip and I'll come to that particular slide and address it, right? Let's move on and let's look at the relevance of QA paper. Why do we feel that QA should be a part of CAT as a paper, which is a qualifying examination for a degree like MBA? Okay, so let's understand what QA really is all about. First thing that I want to talk to all of you, and I keep talking about this in my classes as well, that the paper does not carry mathematics. The paper is testing your quantitative ability skills. And these are two very, very different things. The problem with our education system is we have called what we do in class 8, 9th, and 10th standard as maths. And when we do well on math till 10th standard, we feel that we should take maths in 11th and 12th as well. But when we reach 11th and 12th, we realize that it is altogether a different ball game altogether. Right? So the problem out there is till 10th standard, what is taught to you in the name of maths is not maths. It's a quantitative ability skills. It's a ability to play well with numbers and make sense out of numbers. Mathematics is a completely different domain, which is very different from quantitative ability. So you might not be great at maths, but you can still be good at quantitative ability. And I can give you an example, which is myself. I take quantitative ability classes, but trust me on this, I'm not really good at mathematics. So if you give me something from 11th standard or 12th standard, it becomes very difficult for me to look at, calculus or things like that. But I can definitely look at quantitative ability section with a lot of confidence. Okay. So if you are one among those who is not very comfortable with 11th and 12th standard maths and thinking that this paper has got maths and because I was not great in 11th and 12th standard, I'll not be good at this, please don't do that. Okay. So first thing that I wanted to speak about was this. The second thing is the quantitative ability skills that they test you on your CAT paper indicates your analytical skills to the examiner. That particular section tells the examiner that a candidate is capable of analyzing a set of information and processing that information and come out with the desired set of results. Okay. Now that carries, of course, a bit of understanding of numbers, but as MBAs, there are no black and white solutions available for any of the business problems for that matter. So you can't pinpoint a particular solution and say this is right and this is wrong, right? There is always a gray zone when it comes to MBA, right? So analytical skills are required in these students, and that's why quantitative ability section happens to be an important section. The third primary reason why quantitative ability section is present on the CAT paper is business is all about numbers. You do any kind of business, you look at any domain of business, you will have to deal with numbers. So even if you're wanting to become an HR, trust me on this, as HR also, you will have to deal with numbers. If you are into operations, you will have to deal with numbers. If you are into finance, you will have to deal with numbers. Forget about modern day, companies. Think about it. If at all you have to run a company and you have to manage a company, can you survive without dealing with numbers? That's not possible, right? So the intent is very clear that if you're not really good at numbers, it becomes very difficult for you to survive in the management world, and hence quantitative ability section is a part of this particular paper. Now, what we are looking at in the modern day business environment is most of the decision makings are increasingly getting dependent upon data that comes out, right? So there is, when a raw data is presented to you, you have to do a lot of analysis of that data. You have to come out with an understanding of what that data indicates in terms of future trends, what that data tells you about the past mistakes, past opportunities which were there in the business, and hence dependent upon that reading, you take business calls. And that is the reason of CAT asking you quantitative ability section, because they are giving you an understanding of data. They are trying to test whether you are capable of consuming a data or not and coming out with the desired results. Right. So I wanted to keep this piece, remove this piece out of discussion upfront, that, we should not have this discussion that quantitative ability section should not be a part of a paper that is, for getting into MBA degrees. I don't think that's right. After doing my MBA, I definitely, and after being in the business world for quite some time, I definitely believe that quantitative ability part on the paper is a must. You can't do away with this, and it is going to remain there for a lot longer than what we expected to be. Okay, so please understand that this is an important section. You don't have to become extraordinary on this, but you have to ensure that you are fairly good with dealing with numbers. That's all. Right. Now let's look at the next part, which is the crux of today's session. We are going to look at historical data, and what I've done is I've picked up two random slots, one from CAT 23 paper and one from CAT 22 paper. Now what happens is, on a CAT paper, you have three slots in a day: morning, afternoon, and evening. All three slots have roughly the same distribution from the topics. So that is why I have not gone into understanding every slot paper and trying to come out with the analysis on every slot, because I don't think that's relevant. What is important is to understand where are the questions coming from, what are the topics from where they are asking you the questions, and hence we are going to decide based on that what are my important topics. Okay, so let's look at this. Now, this is the first part of it. I've looked at two modules. One is arithmetics and another is algebra. I'm sorry, the spelling of algebra has gone wrong there. Fine. So if you look at this table, you would understand that on CAT 23 from where the questions were asked, and on CAT 22 where the questions were asked. And I will deep dive into one of in each of these topics and try to make sense out of these numbers. But let me also first of all give you a disclaimer that this classification is not casted in stones. I might classify a particular question into numbers. Somebody might want to classify that into algebra. So there is a fair bit of confusion there, that where do we classify. To the best of my understanding, I've classified it like this. Somebody else who is going to classify the same paper might do it slightly differently. So that's not a problem, because 90% of our classification is going to remain the same. So don't worry about that. 10% of the classification here and there, you might find a bit of difference there, right? Now let's look at CAT 23, which is the recent paper, and look at the arithmetic set of questions. And you would realize that from arithmetics, you had about 6 questions, 2 each coming from these topics, and one each coming from the other 3 topics. So on arithmetics, you are looking at approximately 9 questions. Now, as I said, people might classify it slightly differently, and they might want to call it 7 questions from arithmetics or 8 or 9. That's the only difference. But on the larger ballpark figure, you can expect about 7 to 8 questions or 9 questions coming from arithmetic section out of 22 questions which are there on the paper. Now go to CAT 22 and you would realize that you had 4 questions over here, 2 and 1 questions over here. So 7, 8 and 9. So effectively speaking, if the same person is doing the classification, you will realize the arithmetic section has got same number of questions on CAT 23 and CAT 22 as well. Now, look at the major set of topics which are there. Percentages, profit, loss and discount, and simple interest, compound interest are actually can be classified as percentages and its application. So if you look at percentages and its application, you have got 3 questions on CAT 23 and you have got 3 questions from CAT 22. If you look at ratios and averages, you had 2 questions over here and you had 4 questions coming from this particular topic in the CAT 22 paper. If you look at mixtures and solution, in both the years, there were one question each. And then you had time and work 2 questions and time, speed and distance 1 question, right? Effectively, if you look at your majority of the topic, which is percentages, profit, loss and discount, has remained the same. Ratios and averages has taken good number of questions. And then you have got time and work, mixture, solution and TSD taking some number of questions, right? So the point that I'm trying to drive home is arithmetics happens to be the key to success on this paper. There is no doubt about it. And more when we look at historical data in terms of what kind of percentiles are at what score, you will realize the importance of arithmetics going forward. So keep this number on your mind, that arithmetics had 9 questions coming from it on both the years of paper, which is CAT 22 and CAT 23. Okay, now look at algebra. Your linear equations and quadratic equations had 4 questions on CAT 23. And we had seen CAT 23 was a slightly more difficult question paper, primarily because algebra took a good number of questions, and therein your linear and quadratic equations were not very easy to solve kind of questions. Okay, you had again 3 questions of linear and quadratic equations coming from algebra on CAT 22 paper. That means it has remained almost the same in both the years of paper. APGP had 2 questions. APGP had 1 question on CAT 22. Then you had 1 question on modulus and inequality coming in CAT 22, but it was absent in CAT 23. Okay, but there was 1 question that was increased over here, and then there was 1 question increased over there as well. So this was a set of topics. If you look at this particular piece, you will realize 4 into 6, 7 and 8 questions were there from algebra on CAT 23 paper. If you look at CAT 22 paper, you had 3 and 4 more questions over here. So you had about 7 questions coming on CAT 22 paper, right? So effectively, what am I saying? Again, algebra has remained the same on CAT 22 as well as on CAT 23. Now let's look at the smaller set of topics. And if you look at this, your geometry had 3 questions in CAT 23 paper, coming one each from circles, triangles, and polygons. Now, in geometry, again, classification becomes a challenge because you have a circle. Inside a circle, you have a polygon. Then do I classify it as polygon or do I classify it as circles? So don't go on this nitty-gritty of what is the classification, but try and understand the larger picture that geometry had about 3 questions coming on the paper. All of these topics are geometry topics that you are looking at. Numbers had 2 questions in CAT 23, and in CAT 22 there was only 1 question from numbers. Permutations, combination, and probability had 1 question on CAT 22, but 0 questions coming on CAT 23. Set theory had 1 question on CAT 22, but it was absent from CAT 23. Now, what is the crux of the entire argument of looking at these 2 years of paper? We realize that even if I look at number system, there were 2 questions from number system in CAT 23 paper, 0 questions from PNC, and 0 miscellaneous question, which was primarily a set theory kind of question. But if I look at CAT 22, it also remained almost the same, that there were 2 questions from number system and 1 from a miscellaneous type of question, right? So what are we trying to say? We are trying to indicate that number system is not going to be very, very significant with respect to the CAT paper, and so is the case with permutations and combination and set theory. But I will want to classify set theory slightly differently, because a lot of times we have seen that the set theory questions are merged into your logical reasoning set of questions. So that is where you have to be very, very careful that someday you might find a set of logical reasoning question coming out of set theory. So it's better to prepare on set theory rather than leaving that set theory, because for all you know, in your LR section, you might get that. So effectively, we need to understand geometry is an important one. And why am I saying you might want to say, sir, 3 questions? Because if you go a year earlier to that, which is CAT 21 or probably CAT 2020, you will realize there was a paper where you had about 5 to 6 questions coming from geometry. Now, this is where it becomes another wild card kind of a topic to my mind, that at any point in time, it might happen that you are receiving about 4 questions or 5 questions on the paper from geometry. So you have to be very, very careful about that you can't really leave geometry and get into the paper completely, right? So now let's understand another perspective to the same 2 papers, same 2 years of paper, and understand how much is the score required for you to get down to a 98, 99 or a 95 or a 90 percentile or an 80 percentile, right? So the data is right there in front of you. Please understand that this data primarily is about scale score. That means your raw score is different from a scale score. So depending upon the difficulty of the paper, either your score is scaled up or your score is scaled down. We are not going to get into that argument as to how the scaling up or scaling down happens. What you can understand is when your scale score is 16.8, take a plus minus 2 as a range for your raw score. Beyond that, I have not really seen normalization happening by about 5 marks or 7 marks or 10 marks. It happens probably at a higher percentiles, but not at the lower percentile where you have a difference of about 5 marks or 6 marks. That rarely happens, right? So you can very easily look at this data and presume that a plus minus 2 is what you are looking at when it comes to getting down to that kind of a percentile. So in CAT 23, which is the recent paper, 99 percentile, you had to get a score of 26 marks on a scale score, right? 26 marks on a scale score with a paper of +3 -1 would mean 9 questions correct you wanted to get over here. And you wanted to get roughly about 11 questions correct in CAT 22, right? For a 99 percentile, remember this thing, keep that thing on your mind, that this data right now over here is for 99 percentile. If I wanted to get a 95 percentile, this is where the argument lies, that if you are a non-engineer, nobody is asking you to get a 99 percentile on quantitative ability section. Can I look at getting a 95 percentile? I'm just trying to be very, very practical. I am nowhere trying to imply that a non-engineer cannot score a 99 percentile, because in my lifetime, I've seen several non-engineers getting a 99 percentile on quantitative ability section. So there is no denial of that fact. But what I'm trying to communicate is, if you're not an extraordinary student, can you look at getting that 95, 96 percentile on the QA section and escape through the section? What is the recipe to get a 99 overall in that case? The recipe to score a 99 would be for you, get a 95 plus on quantitative ability section and maximize your score on logical reasoning data interpretation and maximize your score on English as a section, right? So whenever I've seen students getting a 99 percentile overall, I've always found one very clear recipe. What is the recipe? There two of these sections were extraordinary and one of the section was average or better than average, right? That means they were getting a 94, 95 percentile on one of these sections and the other two sections were a 98 plus. So if you want to really get a 99 percentile overall, you should look at that kind of a strategy where you say that I'm going to do extraordinarily well on two of these sections, and on one of these sections I'm going to be better than the average crowd. Where is the average crowd? Probably at 85 percentile, right? So I need to do better than that. That's all. And you will still qualify for every college depending upon the sectional cutoff as well. Hardly a couple of colleges are there which will keep a sectional cutoff criteria of 90 percentile or a 95 percentile, but majority of the colleges might keep a criteria of, let's say, if I'm looking at top 10 colleges, they might keep a sectional percentile criteria of 90 percentile depending upon your category. Okay. Now, look at 90 percentile. Where was it on CAT 23? It was at 13.6 marks. That means even if I do a plus minus 2 on this, you were expected to get about 15, 16 marks. How do you get a 15, 16 marks where there is a plus 3 and a minus 1? You just get 5 questions correct, isn't it? So out of 22 questions, somebody who would have done 5 questions right would have gotten a 99 percentile on the QA section of CAT 23. Imagine. Right? So is it really very difficult to look at 40 minutes of time paper, 40 minutes of paper and get your 5 questions out of 22 right? That's all, right? It's not very difficult. Look at 85%. Where is it? 10.5 marks. And all of these are facts. These are none of the numbers that I'm trying to give it to you to motivate you to prepare well. That's not the case. These are facts right there on the table that your scale score of 10.5 marks got you about an 85 percentile on a CAT 23 paper. That means what? You had to just get 4 questions right. Now, this reminds me of something very interesting that happened with one of our students. I'm not going to name her, but she's right now sitting in, she must be completing her IIM Bangalore program, 2-year program. And what she did on that particular year's paper was the CAT paper turned out to be very difficult. She got into the paper and she attempted only 4 questions in the paper, which had about 22 questions, if I'm not wrong. Right? Then what happened? She came out, she said, sir, I'm not very certain what is going to happen, but I've done 4 questions and I believe 4 questions are correct. It turned out a few days later that her all 4 questions were correct. She cleared an 80 percentile. She cleared an 80 percentile on the section. She was a category student. She got a call from IIM Bangalore and she qualified finally. So you can understand that if you are very clear as to what is expected out of you, do the right thing on the paper. It doesn't matter whether you get a 99 on the QA section or not. So don't get obsessed with 99 percentile on the QA section. You don't have to get 99 percentile. Ultimately, we all are sitting over here to get a good college. That's all. And that good college is what? Top 10 in the country or top 15 in the country. That is what we are looking at. Right? So for that, do I need to get a 99 percentile on the QA section? No, I don't need to get a 99 percentile. I need to do the basic things right, which is to get 7 questions right, which is to get 6 questions right on the paper. And then we have already looked at from where are we getting the questions. Can we naturally prepare for those topics or not? Okay. So this is the data in front of you. If you want, you can take a screenshot of this. This is a very, very interesting, eye-opening data for me. When I was preparing for this particular session, I realized where are we? Look at 80 percentile even on CAT 22, which was slightly more easier paper in comparison to CAT 23. Look at 80 percentile. It is at 11.8 marks, which is effectively getting about 4 questions correct on the paper. Right? So please understand this thing, that it is very interesting piece of data that is there with you. Okay. So just give me a second, guys. Yeah. So now what we are looking at is, you should understand what am I targeting. Now, if you are a category student listening to me, please understand, go to the GradSquare channel and you would realize there are category videos that we have already done. Now those category videos will very clearly tell you at what category, what kind of a percentile were we looking at. I am not saying that target dot that particular percentile, because that might change next year. But what I'm trying to say is you will get a fair idea what is expected out of you, right? So get that fair idea, get that picture very clear in your head. Do not fall for a trap of scoring 99 on every section. Be realistic, understand what is expected out of you, prepare for that expectation and get through the paper. That's all what I'm going to talk about, right? Now, let's, based on our understanding of what happened with respect to percentile and scores, and based on our understanding of from where did we get the questions on the last 2 years of paper, let's try to analyze what are the most important topics that we are looking at. Make no mistake, if you are a non-engineer, your best bet is on arithmetics as a topic, because for the other topics, it's going to take a little more time for you to consume that data, because it is not easy to visualize. Let me explain this point a little bit more. If you look at percentages, we all deal with percentages in our daily life. If I say I got 20% marks, you would understand what 20% effectively means, right? But if I talk about an equation which is 2x square plus 3x plus 4 equals to 0, most of the non-engineers do not understand where the hell is this equation in this world, right? Because we are not able to visualize it on the graph paper, because our concepts are not really great, not because we are not good students, but because we have not prepared for it for a very, very long time, simply speaking, correct? So now my understanding is it is easy to visualize percentage, it is easy to visualize profit, loss and discount, it is easy to visualize compound interest and simple interest, but it is not easy to visualize a log graph. It is not easy to visualize a linear or a quadratic equation for a non-engineer, right? So what you should be doing, you should heavily be preparing on arithmetics. Now, from arithmetics, I've removed one particular topic, which is mixtures and solution. Now, typically what I've seen is mixtures and solutions questions are becoming increasingly difficult on the paper. So I don't really want you to spend a lot of time, look at a mixtures and solution question, and you can afford to leave that question on the paper. You don't have to really look at it. So when I look at percentages, profit, loss and discount, simple interest, compound interest, in both the years of paper, we have looked at about 3 questions. When you look at averages and ratios, you have looked at 2 questions in one paper and you have looked at 4 questions in another paper. Let's call 2 to 3 questions coming from this particular topic. Time and work, in 1 year paper, it was absent. In 1 year paper, it was there. But if I go further back, it is very difficult to find a CAT paper where there was no time and work question. Okay, so I expect at least 1 question coming from time and work, and I expect at least 2 questions coming from time, speed and distance. If I look at this entire chart, what am I looking at is about 7 to 8 questions from arithmetics itself. Now, practically try to understand that if you are cutting down on your topics, you should prepare exhaustively on those particular topics. That means what? You should prepare to an extent that even if you give me a difficult question, I'll be able to get it right. So if I'm looking at about 7 to 8 questions preparing from the arithmetic section, I should expect myself to get about 4 to 5 questions right. Correct? If I can achieve that, get about 4 to 5 questions right from arithmetics alone, then I think my 90% of the task is done. Correct? Now, from the rest of the topics, I need to get 2 to 3 questions correct, and my job is done on this paper of a 99 percentile. Remember this thing, right? If your target is to get a 95 percentile, to look at 95 percentile on the paper, then I think at about 4 to 5 questions correct also, if the paper turns out to be difficult, you might end up getting a 94, 95 kind of a percentile on the section. But nonetheless, I'm not saying that you only prepare for arithmetics. You should prepare on a standalone topic like arithmetic progression and geometric progression. Now, arithmetic progression and geometric progression do not require you to learn functions, do not require you to learn linear equations or quadratic equations, do not require you to learn anything else apart from AP and GP. From AP and GP, we have 1 year seen 2 questions. In another year, we have seen 1 question. I can really tell you that in all probability, you are going to get at least 1 or 2 questions on AP GP on CAT 24 paper. That means what? You should spend good number of days to prepare arithmetic progression and geometric progression. You are expected to get 1 to 2 questions. Get that 1 to 2 question right. Logarithm. Logarithm is, I understand, is a pure algebra. It's a function that you are looking at. But what I've seen is logarithm questions are easy to do on the paper. They're not very difficult. They do not require an extensive knowledge of graphs. They do require a understanding of graphs, but it is not that exhaustive understanding of graphs is a must for you to do the questions of logarithm. That's not the case, right? So you can still look at a log question without knowing much of algebra and can still get it right. Now, anyone who is wanting to look at an exhaustive preparation and wanting to say that, no, sir, I don't want to leave any stone unturned, should definitely look at linear equations and quadratic equation. Because in the last 2 years of paper, we have seen 4 questions and 3 questions coming on this. I can definitely say that I can expect at least bare minimum 2 questions from linear equations and quadratic equations as a topic on CAT 24, right? Logarithm probably 1 question and APGP probably 1 question. So I'm looking at how many questions to be prepared over here. 4 more questions, and I've prepared what, 4 to 5 questions over here. Sorry, I've prepared about 7 to 8 questions over here. I've prepared about 4 questions over here. So I've looked at already about 11 to 12 questions prepared out of a 22 questions, right? Out of this 11 to 12 questions, if I can get half of the questions right, let's say I get about 6 questions right, 4 to 5 from here, 1 to 2 questions out of these 4 questions right, I am looking at another 6 to 7 questions being right on my paper, correct? Now, coordinate geometry, we have seen 1 question coming in one of the papers, triangle mensuration. This is only if you want to get into geometry. Mensuration again is a standalone topic which probably to a great extent do not require you to learn geometry specifically, like triangles, polygons, and all of that. Mensuration is more of area, volume, and all of that. A little bit more formula oriented approach can help you on mensuration. Is there a guarantee to get a question from mensuration? Absolutely not. So we have seen papers where there was no mensuration available on the paper. Absolutely fair. But let's prepare 1 or 2 or 3 more topics, which then ensures that out of these 3 topics, at least 1 question, if it gives me, then I'm making myself a bit more comfortable. So then do your mensuration, do your coordinate geometry. Coordinate geometry, once again, do not really require you to learn a lot of geometry per se. It requires you to have a basic understanding of graph papers and again, to a great extent, formula driven approach. That means you are looking at distances, you are looking at heights, you are looking at visualizing, you are looking at linear equations, how to form a linear equations if 2 points are given and things like that, right? So coordinate geometry can also be one of those topics which you can definitely prepare and get into. Now, triangles is once again that kind of a topic which somebody who is doing quadratic equations should try and look at triangles also, because you have seen several questions where triangles concepts are involved. But let me make this submission to you that it might happen that a triangle concept is involved with a circles concept. Now you are at loss, right? But again, you are trying to just maximize your probability and nothing more than that, right? So if you can learn triangles to a great extent, it will be good for you. If you don't want to, you can still leave. Let me say that out of these 3 topics, you are getting about 1 to 2 questions. That's all, nothing much. Look at set theory, probably 0 to 1 question. So if I look at this entire screen in front of you, and I've looked at what about 6 topics from arithmetics, 3 from algebra, so 9 and 3, 12 and 13 topics. So about 13 topics is what I've discussed on the screen. And very safely you can presume that out of these 13 topics, if it is a worst day for you, you will get about 9 to 10 questions. Now, if it is a worst day, then you'll have to perform better and you will have to ensure that you get those questions right on the paper. So out of 9 to 10 questions, if you can get 6 to 7 correct on a worst day, then it's a deal for you, right? Again, if it is a good day for you, what you can effectively look at is preparing for about 14 to 15 questions on the screen. Out of 14 to 15 questions, get about 7 to 8 to 9 questions right on the paper, and your job is done on quantitative ability. You can very easily skip permutations and combination. You can easily skip number system as a topic. There's no point looking at those things if your arithmetics, algebra, and geometry is not in place, right? So please ensure you know what you are preparing for. Clear? At this point in time, if you have any doubts, I'm going to take a 30 seconds pause. Let me know if you want me to discuss something till this. If you have any doubts, I don't have any questions at the moment with me on the chat box. I'll wait for another 30 seconds. If you have anything, please do let me know. I've allowed everyone access to mic as well. So if you wish to speak over mic and want to ask me a question, you can feel free to do so. No questions? Fair. Let's move on and let's look at the next part of it, where we are going to deal with now as to how do you look at preparing for this, what will be the timelines, what are the important points that I should be keeping on my mind when I'm preparing for the QA section. So let's look at QA preparation and timelines as well. First thing that I want you to understand is, and that's what I've tried to do for the last 35 minutes of this particular session, that keeping your expectations realistic is very, very important, right? Please understand that I am not talking to a crowd which is trying to get a 99.9 percentile on the QA section. 99.9 percentile will be a completely different approach. Keep your expectations right. Keep your expectations very, very realistic when you are preparing for this particular paper. Do not think that I am going to be a 99.9 percentiler on the paper. Not because you cannot be, but because that is not required for you to fetch a good call on the college. I once again tell you that I am not trying to tell that non-engineers cannot get a 99.9 percentile. They can definitely get a 99.9. They can also get a 100 percentiler on the QA section as well. There is no denial on that fact, right? But if you are a below average student or an average student on quantitative ability, on math, keep your expectations very realistic. Do not gun for 14 questions, 15 questions, 17 questions, 20 questions on the paper. Gun for the lesser number of questions, but get those right is the key to success for you. First, get the basics right. Now, I really hate words like tips, tricks, techniques, shortcuts. I believe in none of these. And I have a very strong recommendation to all of you. Do not fall for such words and such things because they do not exist. Now, anyone who claims to teach you tips, tricks, techniques, shortcuts, the problem with that individual is that you have been doing it for your entire life. For let's say 10 years, you are teaching, 20 years, you are teaching, 25 years, you are teaching. That is when you have accumulated that kind of a knowledge and familiarity. A student does not have 5 years of time or 10 years of time to clear this paper. A student has got 5 months of time, 6 months of time, 10 months of time to clear this paper. Now, do you expect them to become as good as you are in terms of your approximations, in terms of your technique, shortcut, mugging up, formulas? It's not possible. I've not really seen students doing that and clearing the paper, right? So get your basics right. Hold on to universal things which will be applicable on every question. And that is how you build your basics. You don't go for formulas, you don't go for shortcuts. Do not fall for so-called tips, tricks, shortcuts is what I've effectively spoken about when I've spoken about basics. Short-term memory loss is normal and revise as much as you can. Now, what do I mean by the short-term memory? A lot of students come back to me and they ask me that, sir, I did this particular topic 2 months back. I was super comfortable, confident with this topic. Now, when I look at the questions, I'm not able to get the answers right. Where is the problem? Am I not a good student? Let me tell you one thing very clearly. You have absolutely no problem if you're forgetting things. You are absolutely normal if you are forgetting things. Why? Because it happens with everybody. So if you talk to any 99 percentiler who has done this earlier, they'll tell you that during their preparation, they went back to a particular module several times. And for me to give you a number, I would suggest that go to a particular module at least 7-8 times in your preparation, and there is nothing wrong with that. So if you're preparing a particular module today, it's okay to come back to this module 15 days later and revise it a bit more. Try a few new questions. Then another 20 days later, come back to this module once again, try 25 more questions on this or from this particular module. Likewise, when you will come back to this module for the fifth time or for the sixth time, then you will realize that you have become a lot better at it, right? But second time when you will come to this module, you will always have that feeling that, I am forgetting things, right? So let's look at the next one. Previous year's question papers are very, very important. Why? Because that gives you a very realistic picture of how the paper looks like. Okay, so you should go back, you should definitely look at previous year's question paper and try to understand what was really asked. Am I able to do these questions within the stipulated time or not? But remember one thing, your preparation cannot start from this point. Your preparation has to start from this point only, that you need to get your basics right first before you look at a difficult order problem. Because if today you look at a difficult order problem, you have gotten into a topic for 2 hours, you have looked at that particular topic for 2 hours, and now you want to master this and say that I'm going to do CAT level question, that's not going to happen. Right? So you need to give it time, you need to build your basics, you need to practice a lot, and then come to the questions which are previous year's questions and look at those question papers. Specifically speaking, last 4 years of paper will give you a very good idea in terms of relevance for the upcoming paper. Write mocks and analyze those mocks thoroughly. Once again, your preparation cannot start from this point saying that today I'm going to go and write the mock without even preparing for anything. Don't do that. Give yourself a good 2.5 months time, prepare well, and then get into writing your mocks and analyzing the mocks. That's a must. Now, in this particular point, the most important word to my mind is analyze the mock. Why am I saying this? Writing the mock is the easiest job to do. Open the mock, sit, write. Whatever score you get doesn't really make a difference to us. I have written a mock, right? Will that do any good to you? That will absolutely not do any good to you. You will have to, after 2 hours of mock, analyze this paper at least for 6 to 7 hours of time. If you can do that, that is when you will realize the beauty of writing the mocks, right? Do not focus on quantity of the mocks that you are writing, but look at the quality of the mocks that you are writing. So your effective task should be to write a mock, analyze the mock, then analyze the mock, then go back to basic working again for good time, because your analysis would have thrown up the topics that you were not comfortable with on that particular mock. Go back to your drawing board, work on those mocks, those topics once again, go back to the basics, try more number of questions, tell yourself that if I get similar kind of a question in the next paper, I'm going to definitely get that right. Prepare that, right? In all probability, on your next mock, you might not have a similar question, but third mock from here, you will have a very similar question. That is where you can get that right. Okay, and then go back and write your mock once again. This cycle of from one mock to another, if it is done religiously for 15 mocks, I can bet my life on this that you will never go down on your percentile on this particular paper. 15 good quality mocks written and analyzed is the job well done. And I can guarantee you that if nothing else, you will at least fall closer to a 95 percentile very, very easily, because only doing the basics right, you can get to at least a 95 percentile overall on the paper. There's absolutely no problem. Now comes the real question, which is the battle between accuracy and speed. Let me make one thing very clear, that today's session, I have only spoken about CAT paper. I have not commented on any of the non-CAT papers. I am not trying to tell you that don't do permutations and combination for a paper like NMAT, which is for Narsimhanji. Definitely, you need to do a topic like permutations and combination for a paper like NMAT, because they have substantial number of questions coming from that. But today's session is not talking about the non-CAT exam, but it is primarily talking about CAT exam. Now put the last point or this particular point in perspective, that should I go for accuracy or should I try and build my speed? Hands down, my vote goes to accuracy as far as quantitative ability section is concerned. That means what? Attempt 4, get 4 right. Attempt 5, get 5 right. Attempt 3 and get all 3 rights. Right? At least do that much. Right? If you are attempting 1 or 2 questions on the paper of 40 minutes, then you are doing something terribly wrong, and that has got nothing to do with your concepts, but it has got everything to do with the way you are managing your time in the paper. Right? Now, that brings me to the second point, which says that, sir, you are then trying to say that speed is not important. Now I'll tell you, and this is a contribution coming from my discussion with Varun, and he told me very clearly that, we have come across several students who have done what? Who have come back to us, no matter what they try, they're not able to get that speed in the paper. They're still able to attempt only 2 questions or 3 questions, and out of that, 1 question goes wrong, and then they are very, very frustrated with that particular scenario. Now what happens? Why is this happening? And should that person not look at speed? Definitely that person should look at speed, because doing 1 or 2 or 3 questions on the paper is not going to clear the paper anywhere close to the desired percentile. That means what? Where are we lacking that? We've come across several students who have got a problem in adding 32 plus 46 in their mind. We've got several students who are trying to look at calculator to do 24 into 76. Now, my problem with this argument is that it is consuming time, which is money for you in your exam. That means you have only 40 minutes of time in your paper. And if you put your 40 minutes of time in doing a calculation like 32 plus 47 on the calculator or on your rough sheet, trying to exactly do that calculation, then there is a problem. And this is where your speed comes into picture. If you really want to build speed, then this is what you should be doing. That do away with your calculators in your preparation. Look at a calculation and honestly talk to yourself, do I need a calculator for this? And if the honest answer to that is, no, I don't need a calculator for this, I can probably do it, but I've not worked hard, because of which I'm not able to get this, then start working hard, right? So please ensure that you are familiarizing yourself with numbers and calculations to a great extent in order to build up your speed, rather than trying to build greatest order of concepts, right? Now, this is where the difference between engineers and non-engineers come up. Engineers are not somebody, there are a lot of engineers who are great at concepts, and no offenses meant to them, but the majority of the engineers that I've come across, they don't really have the greatest order concepts on quantitative ability, but they have one very good thing, which is they're very familiar with numbers. They are not scrambling for calculator on every small calculation. They're not doing that, right? So they're doing those calculations in their mind. What happens? They become more confident. They save a lot of time on the paper, and hence put that time to use on another question and do more number of questions than what a non-engineer can do with the same level of concepts, because the non-engineer is spending time in doing calculations manually or playing with that calculator on the screen. Whatever you do, you have a very limited time with you, right? So during your preparation, keep that on your mind, that your first focus should be on getting everything right that you attempt on the quantitative ability section. And what do I mean by speed? Build familiarity with numbers and calculations. That's a very, very significant thing to do. Seek professional help. Now, let me make that disclaimer very clear that I come from a coaching institute where we prepare students for writing all of these exams. And I'm telling you categorically that you must seek professional help, because that channelizes your energy really well, that guides you really well, that tells you that you know what you should be doing, what you should not be doing, because that is coming from an experience of a very, very long time dealing with all of these examinations. So if you're somebody who's struggling, have never prepared, you are a non-engineer, never prepared with any coaching institutes earlier, out of 100 such cases, probably 2 of these cases will be able to clear the paper on their own, because they're very diligent, very hardworking, and hats off to those students. But the other set of 98 students or 97 students will find it very difficult to clear this paper, because the order of competition, magnitude of competition is really high. So you should definitely seek professional help. You should not shy away from saying that I'm not good at it and hence I need somebody to help me out. There is nothing wrong with that. You should do that, and consider looking at professional help if at all you are not really great at doing things. Okay, sir, it is very difficult if I'm starting preparation now. Rajni, absolutely not. If you are starting your preparation now, you should be very comfortable, be it an engineer or be it a non-engineer. If you are willing to work hard, you can still get any percentile on the QA section, also overall in your preparation. 5.5 months is a beautiful time to prepare for this paper. And this is not something that I'm saying in order to encourage you. I'm just trying to tell you that this is honestly what we have seen happening with these students, that you know, student preparing wholeheartedly for 4 months and clear this paper with flying colors. And that has happened as recently as the last year's paper as well. Which coaching is good, online, live, or offline? Question, the answer to that question lies only with you, and I cannot answer that question on behalf of you. Please understand that you have to understand what kind of an individual you are. If you are an individual who requires a lot of motivation, who requires an external force for you to sit in one place for 2 hours, like a classroom, because when you go into a classroom, you can't walk out of that classroom after 15 minutes, right? But you can close the window when you are doing an online class, right? So if you are an individual who is not very disciplined, then you should definitely look at offline classes. But if you're somebody who's very motivated, very interested, then I think technology has provided you a beautiful tool to prepare which is an online classes, online content, and we do provide online classes, and we do, to the best of my understanding, one of in the best possible manner across the country. So you can look at, I know I'm now getting into the marketing piece, but because you asked me this question, consider looking at the demo sessions with us, and then think about joining us or not joining us. How many hours every day, sir? Rajni, understand, once again, this question is something that I cannot answer. Because if you lie down on your bed with your WhatsApp working, with your Instagram working, with your Facebook working, with everything working around you in the form of a technology, and you sit there for 5 hours and you say, I've prepared 5 hours, then you have not prepared 5 hours, right? So arts dependent is not something that you should be focused on. What you should be focused on is, have I gained confidence on a particular topic or not? If not, it requires more time. If I've gained confidence on a particular topic, it does not require any further time, right? So I cannot pinpointedly say that what is the number of hours, but I will definitely pinpoint and say something, which is, this game is not a sprint of 100 meters. This is a marathon that you are running. So it's not important that can I study today for 10 hours or not. The thing that is important is, can I study 1 hour each day for the next 10 days or not? That is much better than studying 10 hours today, right? So it should not happen in your life going forward for the next 5.5 months that I have not prepared for CAT paper for 5 days, 5 consecutive days. Then you are doing it absolutely wrong, right? So even if you had a bad day of your life, before hitting the bed, can I look at 20 minutes of a reading comprehension peacefully? If I do that, I'm still happy with that. But for 10 days, I have not studied anything for my CAT paper, then I'm sorry, you are not preparing for the CAT paper. I hope that answers your question, Rajni. Sir, keeping in mind a college like FMS Delhi, can the preparation with the limited number of topics in QA be enough to clear the sectional or overall percentile? Vedant, please understand, anything looking at an upwards of 95 percentile on the section is not going to be a problem for you in terms of getting a call from any of the colleges, because they don't keep as high a cutoff as 95 percentile for a section. So getting a 95 percentile plus on the QA section is what you should be targeting. And in this particular amount of time period which is available for you for the CAT paper, it is definitely possible for you to get through. And with these limited number of topics, there's absolutely no problem. So the topics that I've spoken about, I very firmly believe if you prepare these topics exhaustively, there is no reason why will you not get a 95 percentile on the QA section. I will be really, really surprised if that happens, right? Now, let's look at a preparation timeline. What should you be doing? We are sitting in the month of June and today is 7th June. You should be looking at June and July month and trying to complete arithmetics and algebra from the perspective of the topics that I've spoken about. When I say that you should complete arithmetics and algebra topic, I am trying to say that you have prepared exhaustively. So by July end, you are in a position to look at any arithmetics question or any algebra topics that I mentioned, to look at those questions, and I'll be able to do those questions really well. That should be the task in June and July. What should be the task in the month of August and September? You should look at revising arithmetics and algebra extensively. Add a couple of topics more to yourself. So if you have been able to capture arithmetics and algebra, then you should probably look at a topic like functions, or you should look at a topic like geometry and trying to get into geometry and say, let me capture mensuration, or let me capture questions which are based on triangles, at least properties of triangles, at least I get them right. Let me look at coordinate geometry and get that right? So add a couple of topics more. When I say couple of topics, you can of course make it 3 to 4 topics depending upon your situation that you are in. Write mocks. Start writing mocks only after 2 months of rigorous preparation. Don't jump onto the mocks and say, I'm going to write the mocks from today onwards without preparing for the paper. Don't do that. Okay. August and September, you should start writing the mocks. Preferably first week of August is when you should be looking at, if you are starting your preparation right now. In the month of October, of course, needless to tell you, continue writing the mocks. Write sectional test in the month of October. Try to, test yourself by probably not giving a mock paper full length, but just picking up a sectional paper and doing that 40 minutes of paper and trying to maximize your score. add the last set of topics. October should be the last month where you are adding any kind of a new topic to yourself, right? After October, I don't want you to look at that. And preferably, this should be done in the first 15 days of October itself, not even in the second half of October. If you still force me, I'll say, okay, fine, take second half of October, but nothing in the month of November. It will not be possible for you to get those questions right in the actual paper by just preparing for 10-15 days, because a lot of rounds of repetitions, revisions are required in order to ace the topic. Okay. Write CAT and non-CAT mocks also in the month of November. Do the analysis, do the revision. That's all. There's nothing else required. In the month of November, December, and January, you'll have to go and write your exams. So, you should be well prepared by that point in time. Now, I'm going to look at just a few challenges that non-engineers face and what, to my mind, looks like a resolution of those challenges. Familiarity with the topic is a must. That means you should not shy away from doing huge number of questions from a particular topic. Understand that you are a non-engineer. You've not spent your last 5, 6, 7 years looking at maths. Then you will have to look at it right now, and you will have to invest more time in comparison to an engineer who has been in touch with those particular topics for a long period of time, right? So don't shy away from saying that if an engineer has to attempt, or let's say prepare for 15 questions, I'm going to correspondingly prepare for 50 questions. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you do that, that is when you will be able to see success at the end of it, right? So prepare, make yourself familiarize, do as many questions as possible from a particular topic. When you scale down the number of topics, look at it, no, in a greater depth. Short-term memory, I've discussed this, that if you're forgetting things, it's absolutely fine, normal. But what is not correct is that you are not revising it periodically. So make a chart and say, I've done arithmetics today, and now leave 7 blanks out in front of it and tick that blank every time whenever you've revised arithmetics. So your task should be, arithmetic should be revised for 7 times before I get into the actual paper. The moment you do that, you'll be fine. You will not have a problem that I'm forgetting things, but it will require at least 4, 5, 6, 7 rounds of revisions at least. FOMO is fear of missing out, and that's a big problem. Students look at their peers. They say that my peer is getting 45 score on quantitative ability section, so I also need to get 45 today. Is it possible? It's not possible, because your circumstances, your upbringing, your last 5 years of life are absolutely different from what the other one was. And do I need to get 45 on maths? Can I not get a 45 on English to compensate for what he or she is doing? Right? So know your game really well. You are not running a game against engineers saying that they are great at maths, so we will also become great at maths. If they are great at math, we are great at English, we are great at LRDI, and we are very good at maths or the QA section. That should be the approach. Don't look at your peers. Don't say they are great, and hence I also want to become great tomorrow morning. That's not going to happen. Don't run behind those things. Okay. Avoidable errors. When you are preparing for your exam, please ensure that during your preparation, if you get something wrong, don't tell yourself that this was a very simple mistake that I made, and hence I will not make this mistake in the actual paper. Let me tell you very clearly, if you get into a habit of making these errors during your preparation, you will end up making these errors in the actual paper also, and you will regret doing that, right? So what you should be doing, the moment you get a question wrong because of a stupid mistake that you've done, then what you should do, this should really create a trouble for you in your head, and say that next time I don't want to make any such kind of a mistake. The moment you stop it then and there, that is the time when you will start avoiding these avoidable errors in the actual paper. Okay. Now, last piece of advice, how do you look at time management while writing the mocks? Skip as much as you can. Do not be fearful using the skip button. Remember your targets. I am looking at 6 questions, 7 questions. Out of how many questions? 22 questions. I'm looking at 8 questions. I'm looking at 9 questions. I'm looking at 10 questions on the paper. Then also, I have 12 questions to skip. My problem with majority of these students is they don't end up looking at all 22 questions in the paper. Forget about doing something right, doing something wrong. It is a challenge to read all 22 questions honestly in the paper, right? So why is that happening? Because you are ending up spending your time at a wrong place. So what should you be doing? You should press the skip button the moment you realize that this is a question that I don't know. Don't sit there and try to experiment. Preparation is the time to experiment, but writing your exams is not a time to experiment. You go ahead and write the exam in a form of exam. That means I'm not going to test that. Let me try this equation out and see what it gives you. No, exam is not the time to do that. Exam is the time to pull out the question that you definitely know I can do that and come out of the paper. That's all. Otherwise, you will lose time on a wrong set of questions. Attempt what you know is precisely what I spoke about. Know where you want to be. What are your strengths? Skipping questions carry any negative marks? No, skipping questions does not carry any negative mark. Negative mark is only when you have attempted a MCQ question and you have gotten it incorrect. Clear? Next, focus more on accuracy, but ensure that you develop familiarity with a lot of calculations. Do not get overly dependent upon calculators. Know your tables, know your square numbers, know your cube numbers, know your reciprocal percentages. All of that is very, very important. Is it safer to only try questions with zero negative marking? Great. So Rajni has put up a question which says that, is it safe to look at questions which are, let's say you don't have the options. So those type of questions are called as theta questions. Type in the answer questions. So should I attempt only these questions? Now understand, you have a very limited time. You look at a theta question and you try to attempt it only because it was theta question, that I will not get a negative marking. But what a terrible mistake you are doing by investing time on a question that you are not certain about. You could have invested that particular time on a question which you were certain about. And even if it contains a negative marking, you would have, why would you look at a negative marking? When you were certain about that particular question, you will get that right and get a +3, right? First thing. Second thing, the problem is that during the mocks, if you get into a habit of attempting theta questions just because there was no negative marking. So suppose you attempted 5 questions, because there was no negative marking, you randomly mark the answer, and in your final tally, what will happen? It will show as a question attempted. So suppose 5 questions were there, which you marked the answers because they were theta questions, and 7 questions you attempted honestly. So you are now looking at 12 questions. So if I'm going to look at your paper, I'm going to say you are great at maths, an individual who can attempt 12 questions. But honestly, what have you done? You have attempted these 5 questions incorrectly and you will never get them correct. So this 12 is giving you a very wrong picture, right? So attempt a question only if you think you can get down to the answer of that question, not because it has got no negative marking. I hope that answers your question, Raji. Know your strengths and weaknesses. While preparing, know which topics you are really great at, know which topics you are not great at, right? The moment you realize that there is a topic that I'm not really great at, there's nothing wrong with you skipping that particular question. As I said, don't prepare for permutations and combination, right? So when you do not prepare for permutations and combination and you look at a question which has got permutations and combination on it, press the skip button, move on. Where is the problem? At least you are not spending time on it. Time is money on the paper. Please understand this thing. Where are you investing your 40 minutes is really important, and utilize those 40 minutes really well during the paper. Do not panic. Suppose I get into the paper, and this is precisely what happened on CAT 23. That when we got into the paper, we realized first 7 questions are algebra questions. First 8 questions are algebra questions. And typically algebra is a paper or a section that majority of the students don't prepare well on because they don't understand algebra. Now what happens? The moment students are reaching the 3rd question or the 4th question or the 5th question, they are pressing a panic button. They're saying that something is terribly going wrong on my paper. No, nothing is going terribly wrong. You should congratulate yourself that out of 22 questions, I had to press skip button on 12 questions and I had to attempt 10 questions. In the first 6 questions, I've pressed skip button 6 times. That means what? My job is done. I am coming closer to the questions which I will get right, which will be from my topics. So wait for your time to come. Do not hesitate in pressing the skip button. Do not try to judge yourself while you are writing the paper. Your judgment should happen only once your paper is over, right? When the scores are out, that is the time when we will do the judgment. Why are you judging yourself after pressing 4 times skip button in the paper and saying that I'm not really good at it? Are there not 18 questions more left? There are. It is just a mental game. Please understand this thing, right? So do not panic during the paper. That's the worst thing that you can do. In panic, what will end up happening is even those questions that you can get right, you will get them incorrect. Right? So be very, very careful on that. Try different approaches during your mocks and sectionals. That means a lot of times students come back and tell me that, sir, should I start from question number 1 and go to the last question and attempt everything that I know? That can be one of the approaches. Or there can be an alternate approach that I go through the entire paper, I skim the entire paper, I pick out easy questions, I solve those easy questions in the first round, then I go and look at for the second round, and then I go and look at the paper for the third round. Right? Which strategy is correct? To my mind, both strategies are equally correct. Now, where is the problem? What should I be doing? That is something for you to figure out when you are writing the mocks. So take 3 mocks or take 4 mocks, trying to work on a particular strategy, and say that I'm going to go from 1 to last and not look at first round, second round, third round. See if that works for you. If that does not work for you, change, right? But get down to a fixed strategy by the time you have written 8 to 10 mocks. That this is what works for me and this is something that does not work for me. Right? There is no thumb rule. There is nothing right, nothing wrong on this paper, that this is the right way to attempt the paper, this is the wrong way to attempt the paper. What is right is something that you will have to explore and come down to the answers of. Right? Now, the last thing that I'm going to say is that whenever I've come across a student who has actually gotten a 99 percentile, and I speak to them and I ask them that, how did you get the 99 percentile? Every single time I've come across students telling me something so wonderful that I felt that, oh my God, this is something that I didn't know, that, you can look at it like this also. How has that happened? Each of these students have figured it out for themselves during when they were writing their mocks, that what works for them, what does not work for them. Can somebody write down all of these things and give it to you? No, nobody can do that, because something that worked for that particular student might not work for you. Right? So is there one size fit all? Definitely not. Right? What you have to do? You have to work with yourself, improve yourself every day, learn about your mistakes from the previous mock and improve. The moment you do that 10 times, you'll be really good at doing this. Clear? So that brings me to the closure of this session. The floor is open for any of the questions that you wish to ask. Let me also announce at this moment that next week, Tuesday onwards at night 9 p.m., we are starting a new batch. You can feel free to reach out to Sanjukta on this particular number, which is 9282442221. She'll help you out with the details of that particular session. Or if you want to sit for a counseling, if you want to have a word with me or any of the mentors, then please get in touch with Sanjukta and she'll help you out with our numbers and with our availability and all of that, right? So any questions, anyone? When you mentioned revision, what or how exactly are we supposed to revise the whole arithmetic module? Does it mean taking sectional test or watching the conceptual video or notes? Understand, Vedant, that to my mind, one, you should know how to revise on your own. That means I cannot, as an adult, tell you how to revise. You should know how to revise it, but I will definitely give you constructive instructions. What you should be looking at in every revision is doing at least 25-30 new questions that you have not done previously. That's a must when you revise the things, right? So you can, of course, in your first round of revision will require a lot of time, will require you to go back to the same concepts again, will require you to solve those same questions again. But fourth time when you are coming for revision, if you do the same thing, then the problem is that you have mugged up those questions by now. Then you know every step. Then your mind is not working on the new direction, right? So you have to understand which round of revision you are looking at. First couple of rounds, it is okay to look at the videos again. It is okay to resolve the exercise sheets. But when you are coming for the fourth time, fifth time, you definitely need 15, 20, 30 questions every time new, which you had not done earlier, to get yourself better. Sir, will you also help us with LRDI for non-engineers? Rajni, I don't think LRDI for non-engineers makes sense, because engineers and non-engineers both are equally bad at LRDI. Let me be very honest about it. So it does not really make a difference to talk about LRDI for non-engineers. Yes, of course, we can guide you on LRDI and tell you what you are supposed to do. Will we get comprehensive support when we have doubts? Is there one-to-one contact systems available? Rajni, 100% one-to-one contact systems are available with us. You will have on the very first day when I will take your session, I will give you my number. You can feel free to reach out to me on WhatsApp at any point in time, and we can get in touch with you. And we will, the trainer directly will get in touch with you. Same will be the case with Varun, who is a serial 99 percentiler overall, and he is a serial 99 percentiler on English for sure, right? So then what happens? He will also be in touch with you on WhatsApp. AjayZener, who is IIM Ahmedabad pass out, he is taking LRD. He is going to be in personal contact with you. You have his number. You can drop him a text. You don't have to book an appointment. You don't have to do anything. You just have to drop him a text on WhatsApp, and he'll get back to you. Will you also help us with mock analysis, Rajni? At our centers, we look at mock analysis in terms of ensuring that we sit with every single student after they've written 3 mocks, and we sit with them personally one-on-one to understand what mistakes they have done. Every trainer writes all the mocks, and they will then talk about what is something that you've done right on the mock, what is something that you've done wrong on the mock, how are you supposed to further go about your preparation, what you should be doing on your next 3 mocks. All of that is something that we discuss with every student one-on-one. Any other questions, anyone? I think I wanted to keep this session for about 1 hour, but it has exceeded to about 1 hour 15 minutes. Any doubts, anyone, guys? Any more doubts? Any more clarification? None? Fair. Then that brings me to the closure of the session, guys. Thank you so much. Good night and take care. Feel free to reach out to us at any point in time when you need any help. Thank you so much, guys. Take care.